So Rob, there's so many platforms out there. Can you give me a good overview of some of them?
Sure. And I'll just cover some of the popular ones, the most used. I'll give you some plus minuses, all right? The number one platform out there for business to business is Magento. Magento is an open source, as well as there is a paid supported version. It's now strictly on the cloud. It is Magento 2 up to 2.4. It's a complete rewrite of the system. It's PHP Symfony based. We do a lot of Magento websites. Benefit, you can get started reasonably easy. There's no upfront software costs. Obviously, there's hosting costs. It's really best for major e-commerce. If you're a small manufacturer or distributor, this is not really a good starter program, in my opinion, especially if you're an under $50 million company. There's a fair amount of support, to be very honest. There's a fair amount of work that goes into setting this up, and you have to configure it. It's not an out-of-the-box solution like a Shopify. Okay, Shopify, right? The number one business-to-consumer platform out there. Is it usable for business to business? Yes. For very small companies, under $10 million, very few SKUs, no kitting, no complex parts. But look, if you have less than 100 SKUs, they're simple, and you want to get started, Shopify is simple. It's designed to give a consumer checkout, which means it's really most appropriate if most of your customers are either paying you via credit card, ACH, or you can land them over, you can do some work and land them over to a purchase order process, right? It's not designed for it, but it can be done, and it's not hard. What's the advantage? It's highly standard, highly supported, really inexpensive. Downside, it is not going to grow with you. You begin to go beyond a certain number of SKUs and complexity. It's not the right system. Another well-known system out there is WooCommerce, NotCommerce, and all the variants. Now, it's more flexible than a Shopify, and therefore, I still think it works in the same range of size for a very small company, but it's far more flexible. You can get a lot more customization to it. It's very easy to find people to handle the WordPress side of your business. Most websites are built in WordPress, so suddenly all you're doing is tacking on some rather simple e-commerce functionality to a website you probably already have. You can also build it in such a way to handle custom orders, custom fabrication, those kinds of things. So again, if you're a sub $20 million distributor manufacturer, that's a possibility for you. Back to the actual higher end solutions, right? We begin to want to think about something that's in .NET or supported. That could be a BigCommerce. It could be it could also be Asana. It could be a variety of different solutions. One that is upcoming, right, is a headless e-commerce solution. So moving off of .NET, you're back into an open source and PHP world. So what's the difference between the three that I just talked about? One is highly supported software. It's .NET. It's likely to fit well within your corporate environment. You have .NET programmers. The rest of your systems are .NET. And that's really a pretty important thing to consider when you're trying to put in a corporate level e-commerce system. On the other hand, right, what's that benefit of open source? There's a lot of innovation, and headless e-commerce is definitely an area of innovation that we'll talk about, I'm sure, in the future. The last thing that I want to add, right, is the considerations of really high volume, high SKU, high complexity e-commerce. A lot of companies are finding out that their e-commerce is slow. It can't handle the amount of information. It gets bogged down. And that is primarily because you're storing or trying to call too many SKUs, too much information at one time. And that's where this concept of product information management comes from, a single source of truth, an ability to serve things to your e-commerce instead of pulling it directly from an ERP. There are several benefits, one of which is the type of information that's in an ERP really shouldn't support e-commerce. And we talk about that a lot in our discussions. That's kind of an overview of what's out there. High-end e-commerce, you start hitting above, several thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of SKUs. You really should be looking at a PIM, a major e-commerce system, and some professional development. For small players, you'd be surprised how, or as a starter, you'd be surprised how quickly you can get up and moving on e-commerce. Any follow-up to that, Eunice?
You're good. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.